You see Eli Manning connecting with and kind of getting that rhythm with this new wide receivers core?
Well, you know, it is going to take time. I mean, let's face it. You know, when he first got here as a rookie, it took him a lot of time to adapt to Amani Toomer and then to Plexico Burris. And before you knew it, these guys were like peanut butter and jelly. So it's going to take time, folks. Let's face it. But the bottom line is when you have talented players and guys who want to work together as well as they do, it will come together. It's just going to be a little bit.
And one of those guys trying to get into a rhythm on the NFL level is the Giants' first-round pick, Akeem Nicks. He's happy with his progress. He's slowed by a hamstring right now, but he thinks the entire wide receiver core is really starting to put it together.
I think we're doing good. You know, we have our ups and downs. You know, still room for improvement right now, but it's still early in camp, so we just look forward to getting better.
You mentioned Ramses Barton, Paul. Who else from this wide receiver core is sticking out to you?
Well, you know, Derek Hagan, when he came out of Arizona State University, you know, some years ago, was a third-round pick by the Miami Dolphins and had some dropsies issues with the Dolphins. The Giants wound up picking him up last year, and they really didn't know what to expect other than he's 6'2", you know, 200 plus, 4.4 plus speed, you know, in that 4.5 range. He's got some real tools, and I think he's pretty much willing to play special teams as well. So you take a flyer on a guy like that. Turns out he's had a great camp here at Albany. What has he dropped, one pass, John? I mean, he has really worked his way into that fight. I don't know if he's going to make it, but it's an interesting guy to watch.
Is an interesting guy to watch, and it's a big-time fight. A lot of guys are involved, and Derek Hagan spoke about it the other day. He's been very excited. He thinks this whole wide receiver competition helps everybody involved.
It's a great opportunity. We're all out here competing, trying to get better no matter what, you know. Whether it's, you know, from the vets to the younger guys, we're out here competing, and, you know, we got to do what we got to do. But, you know, I wouldn't say it's tough. You know, we know we all got a job to do, and you know, I'm definitely feel like I'm in a right spot and I got perfect opportunities to you know, obviously show the coaches what I can do.
And Paul, of course, these guys don't have time to throw the ball if not for the offensive line. Giants fans have been spoiled the last 2 years, let's be honest. They've had no injuries on the offensive line. This group has been there. They've been nicked up a little bit during training camp. Chris Sneeze missed a couple. Richie Seibern missed a couple. Shona Harris missed a couple. And we've got to see the Giant reserves on the offensive line step in. What have you seen?
Well, you know, you're seeing a little bit of a disjointed situation with some of the reserves because, let's face it, they're not used to playing a whole lot. I mean, as you said, the relatively healthy Giants offensive line has dominated almost every play for the last 3-4 years. So it's kind of hard to gauge these guys. The other thing you got to remember is Gray Rugemer, who was a veteran backing up both at center and guard, was really kind of like an extra starter in terms of the way that those guys treated him. So whenever he had to come into play, it really wasn't like he was a spare part. Now it's a little different, and it's been a little rough around the edges, John.
And it's meant a lot of coaching for Giants offensive line coach Pat Flaherty. He's been on the field a lot, coaching these guys up. And, you know, he says sometimes, especially with the youngsters, you got to get on them when they make a mistake.
Our motto or objective in our offensive line meeting room is correct your mistakes and move on. Okay, don't go backwards. But whether or not we had a chance to see it on tape, okay, I've talked to you about it. All right, we're going to walk through it. We can't keep making the same mistake over and over again. All right, somewhere along the line you got to get it. So yeah, I got my blood pressure up.
And one of those areas of concern has to be at the center position. The Giants, as you mentioned, lost Gray Rugemer, and a lot of guys that haven't snapped before, Booth, Coates, they've had to step in, and as you mentioned, it's been a little bit rough.
They asked me to snap this morning, and quite honestly, I declined. But, John,
I don't blame you.
It's kind of slim pickings out there right now because, again, Rugemer is no longer here. They decided to cut bait with him, and I understand it. But at the same time, he did provide them quite a safety blanket.
He did, no doubt about it. Now we're going to do a little segment. You know about Eisen's mailbag. What I did today, I went around the practice field, went to some fans, got some questions that we could pose to Mr. Tino. Now, first I had to explain who Paul was, and then when they finally realized who he was, they decided to do it. If your voice can handle it, Paul, we got 5 questions here. First, we're going to start from Derek. We kind of mentioned this already. Anybody standing out to you among that group of Giant reserve offensive linemen?
Well, among the reserve offensive linemen, the guy who I'm most intrigued about is William Beatty. I mean, the kid out of UConn should be a terrific left tackle in the pros. Right now, he's got to back up both spots because, obviously they're going to need him there. Booth is already the incumbent backup tackle, but eventually Beatty is going to be a starter in this league, so I'm most intrigued by him.
Running back depth chart. Could be interesting. We know Jacobs is a starter. Danny Ware, Andre Brown, of course, Ahmad Bradshaw. Right now, if you're predicting opening day, what's the depth chart look like?
Well, there's no doubt that Jacobs is the workhorse. I mean, he's done it so many times before. And Bradshaw's going to get your change of pace, reps. I still think that Danny Ware is going to have...
And you love that guy, Paul.
I think he is terrific. He's got the hands. He's got the strength. He's got the maturity this year because he's bunking with Brandon Jacobs. And you don't mess with Brandon Jacobs. So if he wants to take you under his wing and get you in order, you do it. I just watch Danny Ware. That's all I'm telling you.
I know another guy we've talked about a lot. I know you've loved him since he's gotten here is Jarris Wilkinson. Injuries have kind of plagued him the first few years at weak side linebacker. Johnny wants to know, is this a make-or-break year for Jarris Wilkinson?
It's got to be. It has got to be. In all the years I've been covering this team, there have been so many guys who never fulfilled their potential, John. You know a lot about that, I know. And, maybe it was because the coaching staff didn't like them, or maybe it was because the guy was injured. In Wilkinson's case, it's primarily because of his injuries. And, now it's time he's got to step up because the Giants cannot afford to be waiting any longer for Wilkinson to become a real bona fide NFL player.
This question comes from Andre, Paul. Andre wants to know, how much has Andre Woodson improved from year 1 to year number 2?
Well, there's no doubt he's improved some because he's more confident and they've changed his motion a little bit. He's throwing the ball a little bit better, but nonetheless, not as consistent as he would like. We've talked about that before.
And finally, this one from Paula. What player has surprised you the most so far at training camp?
Well, we saw some of Brian Keel last year, obviously on special teams and then in the regular sets occasionally and some in the nickel package. But I love the way he's now become a mature leader on that defense. I'm hearing a lot of leadership things out of his mouth when we get to talk to the players at lunchtime, things that Antonio Pierce used to say. I'm hearing Brian Keel say a lot of those things. So I think that's kind of a surprise to me.
All right, those are the 5 questions, Paul. I think you did a satisfactory job answering them. Final thoughts as we're about to wrap up here. First preseason coming up on Monday against the Panthers. If you're a fan out there watching, what should you be keeping an eye on as we play our first preseason game?
Well, you'd have to be looking at the receivers first and foremost. We all know that. It's a story that goes on and on and on like a broken record here at training camp. Everybody wants to know what these receivers are going to do. But I think the other thing that you want to watch is the battles in the pits. You want to see about these offensive linemen that we were talking about before, some of the guys in the backup roles. How do they look? And then how does the Giants' defensive line look? They've had a lot of nicks and bruises here too, John. They're going to try to get a lot of guys into the game to see exactly what they're able to do at this early stage.
Paul, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much for joining us today in the Giants Training Camp Report.
John, always good to be with you. At least I think so.
All right, Giants.com. Check it out tomorrow. We're going to be from the practice field with Mike Garafolo and Pat Hanlon. Check it out on Giants.com. And, of course, anything during training camp, we'll have it here first. For Paul Dottino, my name is John Schmelk. It's all Giants all the time, only on Giants.com.